You leeched off my husband for 14 years. Daphne's voice cracked like a whip through the courtroom, her manicured fingers stabbing the air in Leona Hayes' direction. Gasps fluttered across the room like birds startled from trees. Leona didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She simply curled her fingers tighter around the cold edge of the defendant's table and kept her back straight, chin slightly lifted like armor. The judge didn't say a word. Neither did Gavin. He just sat there beside his new wife in his expensive navy suit, jaw clenched, but otherwise impassive. Leona saw it then, how easily he let another woman weaponize his silence. It wasn't new. It had always been like that, hadn't it? From the gallery, whispers rippled, bits of phrases like gold digger and she must be desperate, floating just loud enough to be cruel. Leona breathed in deeply, then exhaled through her nose. She wasn't going to cry. Not today. Not in front of these strangers. Not in front of Gavin. And certainly not in front of her daughter. Mr. Patel, Gavin's lawyer, adjusted his tie and rose with the grace of someone who'd rehearsed this scene too many times. Your Honor, he said smoothly, we respectfully submit that Miss Hayes has maintained a pattern of financial dependence well beyond the dissolution of this marriage. Her request for continued support, despite her current employment, raises clear concerns about intent. Leona stared at the veins in her own hands, each word digging deeper under her skin. 14 years of her life reduced to intent. 14 years of sacrificing her own career, sleep, and body to raise their daughter, while Gavin chased every promotion and polished every lie. None of that mattered in this room. Not to them. She glanced to her left, past her lawyer, to where her 14-year-old daughter sat in the second row. Aubrey's legs didn't quite reach the floor. She was hugging her backpack against her chest, eyes locked on her mother. Silent, unmoving, but burning. Daphne crossed her arms smugly, tossing her long blonde hair back like a curtain. She never loved him, she added with a sharp smile. She loved what he could give her, and now that he's moved on, she's punishing him for it, with alimony demands and custody games. A fresh wave of murmurs rolled through the room. The judge tapped his gavel once but didn't speak. Leona felt her pulse in her ears. The courtroom wasn't cold, but she shivered anyway, like she was being stripped bare, one insult at a time. Still, she didn't defend herself, because they weren't really talking about her. They were talking about a version of her they had invented, a woman who only existed in their narrative, the bitter ex, the clinger, the leech. It was easier to hate that woman, easier to ignore the years she spent building a home from Gavin's absences and excuses. Then came the voice. It cut through the tension like a clean knife through silk. Excuse me. All heads turned. Aubrey stood, backpack still hugged to her chest, voice steady but loud enough to make even Mr. Patel pause. Should I tell them what we found in Dad's bank statements? The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was something heavier. Recognition. As if the ground beneath them had shifted by half an inch, just enough to knock everyone off balance. Leona turned fully to her daughter, heart caught somewhere between pride and fear. Because she hadn't told Aubrey to speak, and she had no idea what was about to happen next. He didn't even have a mattress when I met him, just a stack of textbooks, a beat-up coffee maker, and a dream so big it barely fit inside our dorm room. Gavin Bennett was charming, broke, and hungry for something more. I was 19, and I believed in him like he was a gospel. We met at the University of Oregon. I was a second-year education major with a clean GPA and a part-time library job. He was 2 years older, studying business, already talking about mergers and market disruption like he was born for a boardroom. I remember thinking, this man will do great things. What I didn't know was how much it would cost me to make sure he got there. When Gavin's internship fell through our senior year, I dropped my plans for grad school without hesitation. It's fine, I told him. We'll get through this. I picked up shifts, diner in the mornings, daycare in the afternoons, grocery clerk at night. I remember falling asleep on the bus with my name tag still pinned to my chest. Gavin would be home, buried in business plans and job applications, whispering, "It's just temporary, babe." But it wasn't. When he got into an MBA program in Portland, we moved into a one-bedroom apartment with no closet doors and a flickering hallway light. He studied. I worked. I kept the rent paid, the fridge full, and the landlord off our backs. Every dollar I made went to something we needed. Or, more accurately, something he needed. Then Aubrey happened. She wasn't planned, but she was perfect. Tiny fingers, lungs loud enough to drown out every fear I had about being a mother so young. Gavin held her once and said, "Now we've really got to make it." I smiled, but in that moment, I knew his we always meant my sacrifice. I stayed home because daycare was expensive and Gavin said it would distract from his focus. I clipped coupons, cooked lentils, and figured out how to make formula last 2 extra days. Gavin, meanwhile, landed an entry role at a renewable energy firm. Within months, he was flying out for meetings, sending photos from hotel rooftops with captions like, "Just getting started." I watched him rise while I disappeared. I was no longer Leona, the honors student. I became his wife, his daughter's mother. I ironed shirts for meetings I wasn't invited to and cheered for promotions I wasn't mentioned in. Our conversations became calendars and receipts. He talked numbers, I talked nap schedules. He chased equity, I chased diaper sales. And still, I was proud because I thought we were building something together. Until one night, Gavin came home late from a networking dinner and didn't kiss me goodnight. I remember the cold, the distance. I remember thinking, something's changing, but maybe I'm just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was being erased, and I hadn't even noticed the chalk in his hand. He came home in a brand new Tesla and didn't say a word about it. Not, "Look what I got." Not, "Can you believe the deal?" Not even a passing, "Do you like the color?" Just parked it in the driveway and walked inside like nothing had changed. But everything had. That was the year our daughter turned 10. The year Gavin stopped drinking coffee at home. The year he started buying cologne he never wore around me. "Meetings," he'd say, loosening his tie after midnight. Client dinners, he'd mumble while stuffing receipts into his coat. Every weekend became a question mark. I stopped asking. I already knew the answer. Success didn't just change Gavin, it rewrote him. At first, I wanted to believe the best. Maybe the long hours meant he was finally being recognized. Maybe the bonus checks meant we could breathe easier. But then came the silk tie I didn't buy, the lipstick stain on the dry cleaning he claimed was old spaghetti, and the perfume on his jacket that lingered longer than his goodnight kisses. He started sleeping in the guest room for early calls. He missed Aubrey's science fair, then her dance recital, and finally, her 11th birthday. Said he was stuck at a summit in Denver, but he didn't call, didn't even text. I baked the cake myself. Aubrey didn't cry. She just cut an extra slice and left it in the fridge. "Maybe Dad will have some when he gets back," she said, her voice too calm for a girl still holding a party hat. One Tuesday, after school, she climbed into the back seat and asked, "Mom, is Dad allowed to eat dinner with other ladies?" My heart cracked mid-turn of the ignition. I kept my hands steady on the wheel. "What do you mean?" "I saw him," she said, "with a lady at Casa Mexicana. I was with Maddie and her mom. He was laughing a lot. He didn't see me." My stomach turned. "Are you sure it was him? He ordered the shrimp tacos? You always say he only gets that there." I nodded slowly, swallowing the rising tide in my throat. "Did you hear her name?" A pause. Then he called her Raina. That name settled like ice in my spine. I didn't know who she was yet, but the way Aubrey said it, so casually, so clearly, it told me everything I needed. Gavin wasn't just distant. He was somewhere else entirely. That night, while washing dishes, I asked him how Denver was. He didn't look up from his phone. "Productive." And just like that, the lie lay between us, invisible but heavy. He didn't know I knew. Not yet, but I would find out more. And when I did, I wouldn't just be angry, I'd be ready. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday. No phone call, no conversation, just a cold envelope slid between the cracks of our mailbox like a threat too ashamed to knock. I stared at my name, Leona Hayes Bennett, typed in bold across the top. Then I saw the petition. Irreconcilable differences. No mention of Raina. No mention of the months he'd been sleeping in hotel rooms and showing up at Casa Mexicana with a woman our daughter recognized. Just 10 bland pages and a dotted line waiting for my surrender. I didn't have a lawyer, couldn't afford one. Gavin, of course, had a whole team. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, the one I bought secondhand and refinished while he was away on yet another retreat, trying to read through the language like it meant something. Legalese that may as well have been written in another language. My name was everywhere, but none of it sounded like me. Not the claimant, not the recipient, not the former spouse. Just a paper woman being gently erased from a life she built. I didn't fight, because I knew what mattered. Aubrey. So I signed. I gave up the house with the blue shutters I painted myself, the car we both drove, the retirement account with my name half listed on it. I asked for nothing but primary custody and a modest $300 a month, just enough to keep the lights on and dinner on the table. He agreed, too quickly, which, I would later learn, meant he'd already moved on. We moved into a cramped apartment above a laundromat. The floors creaked, and the water pressure was a prayer, but it was ours. Aubrey taped her drawings to the wall. I patched the leaking window with plastic and hope. Then came her. Exactly 31 days after the divorce was finalized, Gavin posted a photo on LinkedIn, smiling with his arm around a young woman at a clean energy conference in Arizona. I zoomed in on her name tag. Daphne M. Whitaker, executive assistant. I didn't need to search. I recognized her instantly. She was the blonde in the background of a Cancun photo from last spring, the one Gavin swore was part of a company offsite. She was barely 27, with a killer wardrobe and the kind of ambition that came in 6-inch heels. But what stung the most wasn't the picture. It was the story she posted the next day. A boomerang of champagne glasses clinking poolside, Gavin's watch visible in the shot. This is what winning looks like. She didn't tag him. She didn't need to. The internet did it for her. I didn't cry. Not right away. Instead, I folded a load of Aubrey's laundry, hung it on the radiator, and wrote eggs and toilet paper on our shopping list. I told myself I'd already won because I still had my daughter. But late that night, as I lay awake listening to the upstairs neighbor's footsteps, I whispered one promise to myself. He may have taken everything, but he would not take me. The subpoena came wrapped in the morning paper, like an afterthought. It was from Gavin. He was petitioning for joint custody. Again, but this time it wasn't out of some longing to be a more present father. No, this was a financial play. If he could convince the court that our home wasn't stable, he could reduce child support by half. Half. That's what my daughter's piece was worth to him, a discount. I sat at the edge of our sagging couch, reading the carefully typed words, each one colder than the last. Unfit living conditions, inconsistent income, inability to provide healthcare coverage. I was a teacher, working part-time at the elementary school down the street, cobbling hours and tutoring to fill the gaps. I made peanut butter stretch into 3 meals when I had to. And somehow, in their eyes, that made me a liability. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and old paper. Gavin sat 2 tables away in a crisp suit and a silver tie I once bought for his first interview. He didn't look at me. He hadn't in years. Beside him was Mr. Patel, his lawyer. Slick, confident, voice like velvet soaked in arsenic. He stood with the assurance of a man who had never lost and didn't plan to start today. Your Honor, he began, his tone almost gentle. This isn't about punishing a mother. It's about giving a child the stability she deserves. He paced like he was rehearsing a monologue. Miss Hayes currently resides in a rental unit with known plumbing issues. She is employed part-time with no formal health insurance and relies heavily on financial assistance. I felt my throat tighten. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. He made it sound like poverty was a crime, like dignity could only be measured in square footage and dental plans. Mr. Patel turned slightly toward the bench. We believe Miss Hayes is continuing to pursue financial advantage through child support. I couldn't even breathe. My lawyer, Lara, squeezed my wrist under the table. She whispered something about holding back for rebuttal, but I barely heard her. All I could see was Gavin's face, blank. emotionless, like I was just a problem to be negotiated down. They weren't just questioning my income, they were questioning my value as a mother, as a woman, as a human being. The judge looked over the papers, expression unreadable. Aubrey sat quietly in the back row, her legs swinging gently beneath the bench. She watched me the entire time. Not Gavin, not Patel, me. I straightened my back. They wanted a case? They'd get one. And they hadn't seen what was coming. Not yet. But it was already sitting in a girl's backpack, zipped beneath a folded envelope neither side was prepared for. Should I tell them what I saw on Dad's Venmo? The words sliced through the courtroom like a blade, clean, sudden, undeniable. Chairs creaked, papers froze mid-flip. Even Mr. Patel, who had been gliding through his argument like a conductor, turned stiff as stone. Aubrey was standing, small but steady, her hands clasped in front of her, her voice carrying with the kind of calm that comes right before a thunderstorm. I felt my heart drop to the floor. Aubrey, I whispered under my breath, leaning toward her, but it was too late. She had already stepped past the wooden rail. My lawyer reached for her gently, murmuring about procedure, about decorum, but the judge raised a hand. His eyes narrowed in curiosity, not reprimand. "Let her speak," he said. Gavin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers clenched on the armrest. Daphne leaned forward like she couldn't decide whether to smile or scream. Aubrey took another breath. "I didn't mean to see it," she said, her gaze steady on the judge. "But a few months ago, I was at Dad's place. He logged into Venmo to pay for my tutoring app and left the tab open when he went to take a call." She turned, just slightly, toward Gavin. "There were a lot of payments, all to one person, Reina Morales." The silence was electric. I watched Gavin's jaw tense. He tried to feign confusion, but the way Daphne's face paled beside him said everything. She knew the name. They weren't just one-time things, Aubrey continued. He sent her money every month, sometimes twice, like $900 here, $1,200 there. I didn't understand what it meant at first, so I took screenshots. She reached into her backpack, and that's when I stopped breathing. She didn't stop at memory. She had screenshots. She had receipts, printed and stacked and neatly clipped together like she was presenting a school project. She held them out to Lara, who took them with both hands, stunned. "I didn't mean to spy," Aubrey added softly, now turning to me. "But I remembered Mom once asked who Raina was, and Dad said she was just an old friend. But he was still sending her money." Lara approached the bench, asking permission to submit the documents. The judge nodded slowly, flipping through the first few pages. His expression shifted, page by page, from neutral to something sharper, calculating. "This is highly relevant," he said at last. Mr. Patel rose, trying to object. "Your Honor, this evidence was gathered without consent. The child. She accessed it while visiting her father's house," the judge cut in. "That doesn't constitute unlawful acquisition. I'll allow it, pending formal review." Gavin opened his mouth, then closed it again. He knew. He knew he was cornered. And now the walls were closing in, faster than he'd ever planned for. What he didn't know was that Daphne hadn't stopped looking at him since the moment the name Raina was spoken aloud. And she was about to say something no one expected. "You told me she was lying." Daphne's voice shattered the air like glass, sharp and impossible to ignore. She shot to her feet, mascara streaking down her face, trembling as she pointed at Gavin. "You said you had nothing to hide. You looked me in the eye and said she was just bitter." All eyes snapped to her. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Gavin didn't look at her. He couldn't. He just sat there, rigid, jaw locked, face pale under courtroom lights. For a man so used to control, so rehearsed in charm, he looked suddenly unfinished, like a statue cracked from the inside out. Judge Sterling cleared his throat, expression unreadable. Beside me, Lara Stone stood up slowly, the folder in her hands thick with weight and consequence. "Your Honor," she began, steady and clear, "the documents submitted by Miss Hayes' daughter show a repeated financial transaction pattern over the course of 3 years. All to one recipient, Miss Reina Morales." She walked to the bench and handed over a cleanly compiled summary. "The total sum of those transfers amounts to just under $72,000. Gavin exhaled sharply through his nose, like he might argue, but no words came. Nothing would come. The judge flipped through the paperwork, page after page of bank transfers, each one a tiny betrayal made permanent in print. His brow furrowed deeper with every line. "You told this court," Judge Sterling said slowly, his voice dipping low, "that you were experiencing financial hardship, that continued child support payments were excessive, that you were being, in your words, bled dry." Gavin opened his mouth again, but the silence waiting behind it betrayed him. Judge Sterling's gaze hardened. "And yet, for over 36 months, you were making unreported payments, some exceeding $2,000, to an individual not declared in any of your financial disclosures." Daphne's chair screeched against the floor as she shoved it back. "Is that where the bonus went? The one you said didn't clear?" "Daphne," Gavin muttered, but it was a whisper, powerless. "No," she snapped. "Don't Daphne me now. You humiliated me in front of a judge. You made me stand here and lie for you. And you were sending her money the whole time." She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed her bag with shaking hands and stormed out the double doors, slamming them hard enough to rattle the walls. The judge let the silence breathe for a moment. "This court does not reward liars," he finally said, eyes still locked on Gavin. "Nor do we tolerate willful concealment of assets from either party." He turned to the clerk. "I am ordering a formal financial audit of Mr. Bennett's income and expenditures. I want all assets reviewed, including deferred accounts and untaxed bonuses." Gavin looked like a man underwater, slowly realizing the surface was farther than he thought. I didn't move. I didn't blink. And for the first time in years, he finally looked at me. But it was too late, because next, the custody ruling would be read, and the truth wasn't done speaking. He didn't just lose custody. He lost the room. When Judge Sterling read the ruling, Gavin sat frozen, shoulders collapsed inward, the confident tilt of his chin long gone. "Primary custody will remain with Miss Hayes," the judge declared. "Child support will continue at the current rate. Additionally, the court recommends a formal investigation into possible financial misconduct." The words echoed like bells, not of victory, but of closure. Beside him, the chair where Daphne had sat was still slightly askew, vacant, abandoned. She hadn't returned since she stormed out, hadn't called after him, hadn't even glanced back. The woman he once paraded as proof of his new life had vanished, just as swiftly as she arrived. Gavin's lawyer looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk or lift my chin in defiance. I simply turned around and walked, step by step, toward the back row where Aubrey stood waiting, arms open, eyes glassy. She fell into my arms with a soft thud, like a weight finally allowed to rest. "You didn't have to," I whispered, burying my face into her hair. "But I'm so proud you did." She didn't reply, just held me tighter, like everything unsaid was finally safe in silence. As we moved toward the courtroom doors, I could feel the eyes on us, not the same eyes that had once rolled in judgment when Daphne called me a gold digger. These were different. Some widened, some lowered, sheepish, and someone behind me, low and quiet, said, "That's the mom they called a gold digger?" I didn't stop walking, but I heard the shift in their tone. There was no mockery in it now, just something closer to respect, or maybe regret. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air hit sharp and clean. The sky was pale gray, leaves curling underfoot. Lara caught up with us at the bottom of the steps, her smile warm but restrained. "You didn't just win," she said softly. "You held your ground, and that changed everything." I nodded, eyes still on Aubrey. "She changed everything," I said. Gavin came out 10 minutes later, alone. No Daphne, no cameras, no supporters, just a man who used to believe he could bury the truth with money and charm, now dragging his briefcase like an anchor. He didn't meet my eyes. He didn't have to. Because whatever came next, whatever audit, whatever legal inquiry, whatever cracks widened in the image he built, I knew one thing. He would never rewrite my story again. And neither would anyone else. Because now, the only voice that mattered had already spoken, and she was mine. I still keep the envelope. The one Aubrey handed me after the hearing. The one filled with screenshots, printouts, and quiet courage. I don't look at it often, but I know it's there, resting in the top drawer of the nightstand I bought secondhand with my first solo paycheck after the divorce. I don't keep it because I need proof anymore. I keep it because it reminds me that truth has weight, and sometimes it walks into a courtroom with braces and a backpack and saves you. The world called me a gold digger. They whispered it in grocery lines, muttered it at PTA meetings, etched it into legal documents like it was a fact instead of a wound. But they didn't see the nights I skipped meals so Aubrey wouldn't feel the emptiness in the fridge. They didn't see the birthday cards I signed for Gavin on her behalf when he forgot. They didn't hear the stories I left out of our dinner conversations, just to protect what little of him she still believed in. But Aubrey saw it all, quietly, completely. And when the moment came, she didn't scream. She stood. I once believed survival meant silence, that staying quiet kept the peace. But peace doesn't come from swallowing pain until it calcifies inside you. It comes from naming it, from saying, this happened, I was there, and I'm still here. They tried to define me by a marriage, but my daughter reminded them who I really was. I was never the gold digger. I was the gold forged by fire. Gavin? I don't hate him. I don't wish him ruin. I just no longer wish him power over the story. That's enough. That's everything. Daphne never came back. Maybe someday she'll remember that day and feel her own version of shame or freedom. Or maybe she'll never think of me again. I don't need her to. I only needed me. I repainted our tiny living room last weekend, soft green, Aubrey's choice. We planted herbs in chipped mugs on the windowsill. The bathroom faucet still groans when you twist it too fast, but the sound doesn't bother me anymore. It's real. It's ours. Some scars don't vanish. They fade, yes, but they hum when the air changes. When someone says something too familiar, when a memory brushes too close. But I don't fear them. I've learned to trace them like a map. Proof of the roads I walked, the bridges I didn't burn, the battles I won simply by staying. And if you've ever been underestimated, misnamed, misunderstood, mislabeled by someone who only saw you through their own fear, then maybe in some small, trembling way, you know how this feels. To finally be seen, to finally see yourself. If this story echoed something inside you, I hope you'll leave a comment, maybe even share it. Quietly, like a secret between survivors. Or subscribe to Revenge Her Way, not because you were told to, but because something here made you remember your worth. And if no one else has said it yet, I believe you. And I'm so proud you stayed.